My name is Steven. I'm a senior biomedical engineering student here at Case, and I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
I'm Danielle. I'm also a senior. I'm a evolutionary biology pre-med student at Case, and I'm from about an hour west of here in Sandusky, Ohio.
My name is Cassandra. I'm a freshman nursing major, and I'm from Marietta, Ohio.
My name is Benza, and I am a junior chemistry French pre-med major, and I'm from Youngstown, Ohio.
My name's Shelby, and I'm a junior biology major from Grove City, Ohio.
I'm Emily, and I'm a sophomore nursing student from Portland, Oregon.
I wanted to make sure you were aware of Ayla.
Still not on.
Introduce yourself to Ayla. She's in the back. She is responsible for our Parents and Family Fund, and that is a fund that gives money to our career counseling areas, student activities and leadership, civic engagement and learning, as well as our academic support and physical education and athletics. So please stop by on your way out to at least get the handout that shows what the Parents Fund is all about, and feel free to ask Ayla questions. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk with you. I'd like to introduce our speaker. Marjorie Savage is the Parent Program Director at University of Minnesota, serving as the liaison between the university and the parents of its 29,000 undergraduates. Marjorie has done research on the growth and development of parent services in higher education, and she routinely conducts assessments of her own program in order to measure the success of services and to better understand the concerns of college students and their parents. She has done consulting for colleges and universities both nationally and internationally, and she is a frequent speaker on the topic of college-parent relations. She has written numerous articles on college parenting and is the author of You're on Your Own, but I'm here if you need me, mentoring your child during the college years. So please welcome Marjorie Savage.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. It's really nice to be here. As Edwin just said, I have worked with parents for 20 years, and I have done a lot of research, a lot of study, a lot of writing, and a lot of speaking on the topic, but I can honestly say nothing prepared me for taking my own kids off to college. It is just a different experience, and you think you're ready for it, and then it happens, and it's a complete surprise. I do want to assure you, my kids actually made it through school. They graduated, they got jobs with benefits, they have paid off their student loans, so there is another end to this whole process. So keep that in mind as we go along. Parenting college students is an evolving process. The way you parent your first-year student is not the way you're going to parent them all the way through. It's kind of like when they were first born. You might remember, the way you parented an infant, and they were so cute when they slept, and it was just such a warm, fuzzy thing. And then they started walking, and it was a whole different process. And then they got to the terrible twos, and you had to parent differently yet. And then by the time they were 4 years old, they could actually hold a conversation with you and tell you what they were thinking. It didn't always make sense to you what they were thinking, but you could understand it, and you were simply parenting differently. And that same thing tends to happen during the college years. Each year is a little different. So we're going to talk today about some of the big picture things that might come up for college families. Some of the issues that we talk about will probably never be a concern for some of you, but you may hear about it through friends, through relatives, through your student and what their roommates are going through. So they are critical topics that you may be thinking about at some point. And as you learned, we have 6 students here to help us with the conversation, to give their perspective, because that's really only fair, right? Now, I asked about homesickness, and very few of you indicated that your student has been homesick yet. One warning, homesickness doesn't always happen in the first couple of days or even the first few weeks. Shelby, I think you said you didn't end up getting homesick until quite a bit later, am I right?
Right, yeah. My first year, I went home every weekend the first month of school, which I regret because I feel like I missed out on a lot that was happening, because that's when that's when you're meeting everybody. That's when the first round of programs are going on. But so I went home a lot that first month, and then so I saw my parents all the time. But when it got to after winter break, when you have that long stretch where it's cold outside and you don't want to go outside, don't want to do anything, between winter break and spring break, that's when I got really, really homesick.
And Emily, you've come from a much farther distance. What about homesickness for you? Did you suffer any?
I think the biggest thing that I had to deal with was changing from being from the West Coast to now living in the Midwest, and the difference between the two areas. It would be kind of sad when people were like, oh, I'm just going to go home for the weekend, and I obviously can't do that. So that would be a little difficult. But when I went home for Thanksgiving, it was really nice. Even though I was only there for like 3 days, it was kind of like a teaser of what home was, but it was still really nice to like experience home.
And really, students, I think all of them agreed that care packages can never come too soon. Shelby, will you talk about the care package you recently got?
Yes. So this past week was a terrible week of just tons of tests, and my parents didn't hear from me, so naturally they're like, well, it's probably something's probably wrong or she's busy. So they sent me a care package, and all that was in the care package was a little pumpkin and like some gourds, they sent me fuzzy socks with like ghosts on it for Halloween, and a tube of toothpaste, and it was like the best thing I've ever gotten. So care packages are awesome.
And making them your own is a really good idea. Students do have an image of what the college experience is going to be like. They've thought about it for years. They have this picture of what's going to happen. And then they get to campus, and nothing can ever measure up to what they have imagined. They might think that their roommate is going to be their best friend, and maybe they're not. Or they might find that the things that really tend to bother them are that they have to wear flip-flops to the shower, or that the neighbor is playing country music. Wondering, Bence, can you talk a little bit about issues that might have come up with roommates that you just had never expected?
Yeah. So my freshman roommate and I got along really well. But once you're living with a new person, you realize that there are certain things about the way other people do things that can really bother you. And our freshman year, we had our beds bunked, so I was on the bottom and he was on the top. And I don't know if he was just lazy or something, but there was a frequent amount of times when I would come back from class and he would be napping on my bed. And it wasn't like he's like in my sheets or anything, but just laying on my bed, and all I wanted to do was collapse. And that was one of the things that I found that like really annoyed me. I was like, dude, just please climb up to the top of your bed and sleep there. And then the other thing was, is he liked to work out in our room a lot. So I would also come back from class, like open the door, and he'd be doing like Pilates or something on a yoga mat. And that's kind of when I just learned that like we have to learn to respect the space as a shared space. And if you each devote like time when, okay, the room's yours now and I'll respect your time later, then you can just get along just fine.
Danielle, what about you, roommate?
I think with me, and like being a senior, I've had a lot of roommates, but all of them, I get more annoyed with people doing things how I haven't learned to do them all my life. I think it's just getting used to the fact that there are multiple ways to do things. Even, it was like things as small as like, especially when you become an upperclassman, you get a kitchen in your apartment, and like people cooking, and I'm just like, you're not peeling that potato right. Like what, and sometimes you just kind of get annoyed. You're like, oh, let me do it. Like, it's frustrating, but you just you have to like realize there are multiple ways of doing things. Yours isn't the only right way.
And Shelby, you have to tell them about your summer roommate.
My first year, I had a wonderful roommate. Like, we're really good friends, but you know, you'll have different roommates. Well, over the summer I stayed here, and my roommate was a nudist. So seeing that for the first time, you're just kind of like, should I look or should I leave, or like, what do I do? But I didn't really do anything. I didn't really handle it the first couple weeks, but like just being able to talk to them and be like, this isn't comfortable for me, and since we're sharing a room, there has to be that compromise. So
when you hear issues like that your student might, I can't believe I have to live with this, I think actually Shelby's comment is the important one. You need to talk about those things. Have that conversation. Finances are always a big issue for families. I've never come across a student, no matter what their family's health or wealth situation was, that there wasn't some financial situation that came up. You may think you have talked with your student about finances. In some cases, students don't hear precisely what you have said. There was a recent graduate that was talking to me one time and said that she was looking at a job. It wasn't necessarily the highest paying job in the world, but she thought it sounded fine and she thought she could live on that. And her parents said, well, okay, but you figured in an apartment and food, but what about repaying your student loans? And she said, well, you guys said you would help with my college finances. And they said, we said we would help, not we would pay for it all. You have some responsibilities here. So those conversations need to include, really, what are you expecting? Danielle, you worked at a credit union, so what lessons did you pick up from that?
Yeah, I've worked at a credit union since the summer before coming to Case. It's been my summer and like winter break job. I just go back to it. So I kind of have like a lot in my head about how to work with finances. I also pay for my college completely on my own, so I have racked up quite a few student loans. And I think the most important thing with that is you don't really realize it, because you never see the money. It just kind of, it goes to Case and you're just like, oh, I took out another loan this year. But you don't really realize it until about your junior or senior year and you look at your balance and you're like, wow, I'm multiple $1,000s in debt. And just really keeping on track with that and realizing that you are in debt that much and you're going to be responsible for that. And then at the same time, being responsible with the money you spend. I know a lot of parents they'll give their students credit cards or debit cards that they put money on. And I've seen because I don't do that, I use my own money, but I've seen a lot of my friends do it. And the best thing I've seen with that is to put restrictions on it. Don't just let your child go out and say, spend whatever they want. I know a lot of kids actually call their parents and say hey mom, I need some new pants. Can I buy some? And they'll be like, yeah, because you're gonna be less likely to spend money if you have to call your parents and ask for it. But just really realizing how much money you're spending. College is a good time to kind of start building up a responsibility for money and learning the value of a dollar. And you really do once you're kind of broke in college by yourself. I'm also a big proponent, I was saying yesterday, of getting a credit card, because it's a good time in college to start building up your own credit. Even because, at this point, the highest limit you're going to have is about $500. And having your student get a credit card and then paying it off on their own is a big responsibility tool.
Stephen, you are nearing graduation. Any thoughts on the whole financial planning, money management side?
So over my college experience, I've definitely had the advantage of getting a lot of practice managing my own finances. Since freshman year, I've been paying for my own books and my own food. And then last year I took a co-op, so I took a semester off to work at Phillips. And at that point I was paying for my own car, my own housing, my own food, everything. And then when the bill came from Case to pay for housing, instead of calling my parents oh, hey, you have to pay this bill, I was like, oh, right, I have to do that. So I think being able to acclimate towards handling your own finances is a great opportunity and something I think a lot of your kids will be doing.
And we all do want them to get to that point. Time management. For first-year students, this may be the first time that they have ever been solely responsible for their own schedule. There's nobody to remind them that there's a test coming up or to remind them that they have to get some sleep, so go to bed at a decent hour. And there is a tendency for students to sort of overdo everything, especially in the first about 6 weeks. Cassandra, you are new at this. How's the time management going?
It's going pretty well. I think I'm one of the overdoers in that I came prepared knowing I had to be smart about my time and I had to budget it accordingly. And I've regretted a couple of times not going out and doing things and enjoying the college experience, first off with some of the programs. So when it comes time for a test, you need to focus, but also get out of the room a little bit.
And I think it's really important for parents to be the ones who will listen to that. You're studying all the time. College is supposed to be kind of fun too, and there needs to be balance between the fun, the studying, and the personal time, which includes sleeping. Bence, you said that Google Calendar is your best friend, is that?
So when I first came into college, I kind of had an idea of how to budget my time and do time management, but I realized that there was just so much going on that I needed to keep track of it a little bit smarter. So yes, I made Google Calendar my best friend. I put in my entire class schedule. I put in all of my meetings, block off times to study, set goals for when I want to be in bed. And also I use the tasks to list all of the tests and homeworks that I have coming up. And at the beginning of the semester, something that I always do is during syllabus day, when every professor gives you their syllabus, I sit down and go through all the syllabi and write down when I have my tests in my calendar. And then not only do I put the day that the test's on, a week before that test, I'll set a reminder hey, you have a test in a week, start studying if you haven't already. And that way, I kind of always know what's going on. And if I forget about something kind of in the thick of things, there's always something there to remind me that I have things coming up.
Emily, was it you that talked about color coding your calendar?
I think that was Danielle.
Danielle? No, nobody remembers. Okay.
I mean, I will use colors every once in a while to there's a certain color that's for my tests, and then some that are my different activities that have meetings.
It was you.
Yeah, no, I thought Danielle also did it, but I do it every once in a while just so I know what I'm exactly doing that day, or is it a test, is it a paper, is it a quiz, is it a meeting? Just what's going on is really helpful.
When it comes to student privacy, I know it's a different situation entirely for families. At the college level, your student owns their academic records, and if they want you to see it, if you want to see it, they have to give you permission. I know that's very different, and for some families, it's a shock. Honestly, this is not something that Case made up. It is a national thing. All colleges and universities have to deal with this. What we're finding is that students today are a lot less hesitant to share information with their parents than they used to be. That may or may not mean that they give you that permission. Stephen, do you share data with your family?
That's right. I was saying I had sort of the blessing and curse that my parents are very technologically literate. So I've probably given them the password to that whole operation maybe 24 times since I've been here. But I don't think they actually know how to look at my grades, so I just kind of have to tell them. But we kind of have an honor system.
And Shelby, what about you? Do you share that data with your family?
I decided not to give my parents access to that because in high school they were very, let me see your test, how'd you do on your test, let me see assignments, things like that. And that gave me that, I was already self-motivated, but it gave me that little bit more motivation in high school. Well, coming into college, I wanted to be responsible for everything myself. If I did bad on a test, I wanted to really look at that and be this is all on me now. I have to take care of that. But sometimes I do regret it, not giving my parents access, because I think it upset them and that they don't feel as involved anymore in my grades and stuff. But with that, I also make sure to tell them how I do. Be open and honest about it. Because even though it's on me and it's my responsibility, I still want to tell them, and I want them to have that involvement.
And certainly when it comes to the bills, many of you are paying at least some of those bills, but they don't come to you, so that can be a huge frustration. The university makes it simple enough for you to be able to get that information if your student is willing, and I think it's a really good conversation to have if you have not yet about what information do you need. Why do you need it? How are you going to get it if they don't give you the access to their records? How are you going to get that information? And also, what are the consequences if you don't get it? Because if you don't get the bill, you're not going to pay it. And then the consequences are all on your students. So have those conversations. Families today are different. I know that The question comes up frequently, you know, what's with all this parent college stuff? Why are we even having these meetings? Everything today is different. The way we teach, the way students learn, the way families relate to each other. The good part is students today tend to have great respect for their families, and they trust their families' advice. They do tend to go to their families. Those are among the reasons that we do communicate with families the way we do today. Also, the fact is that students today share far more with their parents than many of us would have done. Certainly, I would have not been as open as you guys seem to be about, you know, I didn't do that well on a class. I'd be happy enough to wait until the grade came out and then let them figure it out. But students today are talking about those things. This kind of gets into the whole, you know, students want to be independent, they know they need to be independent, but they're not necessarily completely prepared for it yet. And sometimes they just flat out want and need your support. I had a mom tell me one time that her son had called home one morning. It was early in the morning, and it was about 4 weeks after classes started. And he said, "Mom, I can't find my glasses." And her initial thought was, you've been gone for 4 weeks and you're just thinking of this. Now, he had contacts, but he wore his glasses sometimes, so what's the deal with that? And she immediately went into mom mode. And it's like, oh, okay, I will check your room. I'll check the bathroom again. If I can't find them, I can call the optometrist. We'll get another pair. It's all going to be fine. And he finally interrupted her and said, no, Mom, they're here. I just don't know where, and you've been the one who could always tell me where to look. So where should I look for my glasses? So those are the kinds of things that are sort of that back and forth. I am independent, but you need to help me sometimes. And that can be a little frustrating for families. When students call and you're not sure, am I supposed to help with this? And your tendency, I know I'm a mom, if a student calls home, needs help, your tendency is, I want to help them. But before you jump into it, ask yourself a few questions. The first one is, are they actually asking for help? If they're not, if they're just talking, they're trying to process it, they're trying to make sense of it all. But if they're not asking for help, then don't jump right in with it. The second question is, can most college students handle this? Does it seem like something that most students can handle? And there are some situations that I have seen where really an 18-year-old can't handle this, and they do need some assistance. But if you think that most students are able to handle this, then back off. If my student can't handle this, why not? In some cases, there are real reasons, physical reasons, mental health reasons why they can't deal with something. By all means, you need to advocate for them. And then the fourth question is, what will my student learn from handling this himself? We really want students to handle their own issues. That's how they learn who the people are who can support them now and in the future. It teaches them problem solving, and it teaches them how to talk about the issues that come up. And also, if they can't think what they'll learn from it, what won't they learn if you do it? What are they going to miss if you're taking care of it for them? It is not unusual for students to change majors or change a career plan at some point during their 4 years. The first year or two, they are discovering whole new careers that they never even heard of before. They're also learning a little bit about what they don't want to do with their life. There's only a couple of these students who have changed their plan a little bit. Bence, you changed your direction a little bit, right?
So I came into college not knowing exactly what I wanted to do in terms of my major, but I knew that I wanted to be pre-health, and my ultimate goal is to go to med school, and that hasn't changed. But I really wasn't sure whether I wanted to go into engineering, like just do a pure science, or some alternate major. So my first semester here at Case, I kind of took like a mashup of classes, like some engineering classes, some basic pre-med requirements, which are just basic intro courses. And I also took some French classes. I had studied French for 4 years in high school, and I didn't want to lose all the knowledge that I had gained. And in those first couple months, I quickly figured out that engineering was not cut out for me, and I was able to kind of cut that out. And I ended up deciding that I was going to do a chemistry major. It was something that I liked in high school a lot. and I really enjoyed the classes here. And talking to the professors in my department, I really enjoyed working with them and learning from them. And in addition to that, I decided to keep my French major just so I could keep learning and looking at the courses that I would have to take. They all looked very interesting, so it kind of kept me motivated for that. And then, of course, I kept my pre-health track.
And Shelby, you changed your track a little bit too. I'm sorry, Danielle.
You're fine. Yeah, I kind of went all over the place. I knew coming in that I wanted to be pre-med, but I came in as a pre-med history major, knowing that pre-med I would have to take all of the required classes anyways, and history was always my favorite. But I ended up, similarly to Benza, I ended up taking a lot of classes in my first year to cover the liberal arts requirements. So I got those done like right away, and that allowed me to take like philosophy classes, history classes, all kinds of random things, anthropology, which I had no idea what it was before coming in here. And after taking those, I actually found that I like classes that I really liked, and that's what led me to choose an evolutionary bio major, which like I didn't even know existed. And now, through taking all of those different classes, I was able to learn of different majors that were offered that I didn't know were first coming in. And I think the best thing, one of the things I like about Case is the fact that, people think that they shouldn't change their major, but it's best to change it at the beginning instead of ending like your senior year and hating what you just studied for 4 years and not wanting to do anything with it. And the thing with Case is you can't even declare your major until November 1st of your freshman year, so you don't really come in with majors, so you're not actually changing it. So it's good to use that time to figure out what you really want to do.
We have heard from students a lot that they're not happy with their major. They might talk to their advisor about the fact that they wish they could try something else. And the reason they don't very often is, my parents would be so disappointed. I came here for this major, and if that's not what I do, then why am I here at all? Give them room to change their major. They're going to come out with a really good degree. That's really the important part. And students who are unhappy with their major can end up doing really badly in their classes just because of that unhappiness. So give them some room for exploring and, if necessary, making some changes. Right now, you're probably focused on your student being gone. They're going to come back. It happens multiple times over the course of the 4 years, and sometimes even after the 4 years. But it can raise some different issues. Shelby, what happened when you went home?
When I went home, the first time I went home, or
For a
an
longer
extended period of time, was Thanksgiving. And it was a really short period of time. And I was so happy to see my parents, and that was great. But the break went by really fast, and I ended up missing Case. So I wanted to go back. And it was definitely apparent during winter break when the first 2 weeks, I was ecstatic to be home. I was ecstatic to see my family. But the last 2 weeks, I wanted to go back to Case. I missed Case. I missed all my friends here. And I think my parents were almost kind of offended with that I didn't see my home, where I was raised anymore, as my home. I called Case my home, which I think is kind of a shock initially. But I think they start to understand that. Like, I spend my time here, and it was different, but it was still home.
Emily, you had a long way to go home.
Yeah, like I said earlier, when I went home for Thanksgiving, it was kind of like this weird tease because I had yet to be home, and I was basically home for 3 days because it takes a while to get to Portland, Oregon. And I kind of felt bad being home in the sense because I really wanted to spend time with my family, but there's also my friends that I hadn't seen in like 3 months. And I only had 3 days, so it was like this weird, it was just very difficult to make sure I had quality time with my family, quality time with my friends, and enough time just to enjoy the city that I'm from. But luckily when I came home, like another 3 weeks later, winter break, I had more time to spend with them, and Thanksgiving is a holiday that you spend with your family, so I was there, but I just felt bad because I didn't want my parents to think like I didn't want to spend time with them, because that was not the case. It was more I just didn't have time.
One question to ask before your student comes home that first time, especially if it's been more than a couple of months, students change really quickly in the first few months. And it's good to find out from them, has anything changed before they show up? One dad was telling me that he picked his son up from the airport. He and his wife were in the car. The kid got in the back, and they started out of the airport, and there was this kind of quiet, "Mom, Dad, can you pull over?" And the parents, of course, in those moments, as they're trying to find someplace to pull over, are thinking, what has happened? It's got to be bad. Thinking every horrible possible thought. And they pulled over and they said, well, okay, just tell us, let's get it out and we'll go from there. And he said, well, okay, I think I'm a vegetarian. Now, it would have been better had this not been Thanksgiving Day and the turkey was in the oven, had they known a little earlier, but it wasn't the end of the world for them. But ask them before they come home, has anything changed? Is there anything I need to know? Also, tell them if there's anything that has changed at home. One student came back from Thanksgiving break, and I asked him, how was your break? And he said, oh my God, my family. I said, really? What's the deal? And he said, they bought a new toaster, and they didn't even tell me about it. Okay, that was my reaction. It's not good to laugh at students, but I did. And he said, no, you don't understand. In my family, we have always done things the same way. We get up in the morning, my mom sets the table, my sister makes the coffee, my dad gets the paper, I make the toast. They bought a new toaster. I'm the toast expert. They've got this toaster now. They don't even know what they're doing with it. It's so fancy. They should have asked me. So little things like that you really don't think are going to make any difference in the world really do. So talk to your student about what has changed at home. There are, in many cases, a sibling who either went to college before yours or is there. And for younger students, it's a transition when the older student goes to college as well. Everything seems a lot different to them. Some students actually love the extra attention. Mom's taking me shopping now, and not you. Or they may hate it. All eyes are on me. This is really uncomfortable. Stephen, you have a younger brother. What happened when you went home?
Well, my younger brother and I had shared a car for all of high school. But since I was the older brother, I kind of always saw it as my car that he was sharing. So when I first got home and got into my car and oh, the tank's empty, there's trash all over the car, I kind of freaked out. And it definitely took a period of adjustment to maybe acknowledge that, okay, this now sort of was his car, even though I always saw it as my baby. So there were definitely little toughs like that with my little brother.
And Emily, you have an older brother, is that right?
Yeah. I remember when my brother went off to school, and there was a transition period to realize he was no longer at the house. You're no longer going to his football games, no longer seeing him at school. And it was just kind of sad for a little while. But then I got used to him not being there. So it was really weird when he came home, because for a few days you're like, oh sweet, my brother's back. But then there was wait, I'm not used to you being here anymore. I'm used to having the bathroom to myself, sharing, all these different things were happening. And I'm you can go back home, you can go back to college now. This is my space, what are you doing? But there's definitely a transition period of realizing they're no longer there, but there's also another transition period of realizing they're now back in your life.
And friendships are another thing. I think it was mentioned a little bit that you go home and you want to see your friends. When students leave for college, their high school friends are convinced, the best friends they're ever going to have in their entire lives. And then when they go back again, there can be a change. Now, Cassandra, this is really kind of new for you. Are you in touch with your high school friends as much as you thought? Changes?
A lot of the close friends I'm making the effort to stay in contact with, and so are they, but we're all going through such like a new experience, it's kind of hard. So in budgeting your time, you have to make room for them, and if they mean something to you, you will make time.
And Danielle, what about you? You've been out of school for a while.
Yeah, I mean, being 4 years removed from high school, it's inevitable that you do lose a lot of friendships you did have in high school. With me, I still have like a small group of people that I keep in touch with, and it really is making the effort to keep in touch with them. But I've realized that the friends that I make in college, being around them, 24 hours a day for 4 years in a row, you are significantly closer. And you're gonna lose friendships from high school, but you're gonna make even better ones in college. And actually, like the thing that I've found difficult, which is pretty recent, being a senior, last year a lot of my friends were seniors. So now I'm kind of adjusting to not only making an effort to keep in touch with my high school friends, and my current friends that I go to school with now, but also a lot of my friends graduated last year. So you just have to choose the friendships you wanna keep for the rest of your life and make the effort to keep in touch with them.
It's a huge transition for students to start the college years, but it's also a huge transition back home. Now, students on campus, things come up. We have incredible support groups for students on campus. There is nothing that can come up that we don't have some kind of support for your student. But you're back home, you're going through a transition, and you don't have that level of support. One of the things we often see is that spouses, partners tend to have exactly the opposite reaction when a student leaves. So one of you might be thinking, this is great. We don't have to have dinner at a specific time. We can go out whenever we want. We can move the big TV into the bedroom. It's fabulous. And the other is thinking, slow down. Let's keep things the way they are so when they come home, they'll be comfortable. Please keep in mind, the harder one of you pushes, the harder the other one is going to push back. Change does happen, people do get used to it, but sometimes a slower pace is not a bad thing. And think about, this is a good time for you. It's a good time for you to do something that you haven't had time for before. Even if you still have younger children at home, most parents find, I've got a little more time than I used to. So think about what you might do differently. And we haven't really talked about this, but have any of your parents done anything different? Well, actually, you mentioned something, Cassandra.
My parents, about a week after I got here, called me and they're like, well, I guess what's new with us is that we bought some property in Virginia. I was like, oh, okay. So I think that may be a distraction for them, or they're preoccupying themselves with that so that they can run off for the weekend. But that was something pretty new that I don't think they would have done if I was still home.
What about Danielle?
My parents were, I always had my mom and dad were kind of just like mom and then dad. And they didn't really do a whole lot together because they were always worried about me, and they did things with me all the time, and then my older sister. But then after I left, they started going on dates and random things, and I would call my sister Mom and Dad went out on a date yesterday. It was weird. But they actually got a lot more close, and it's kind of funny going back home because they're like, oh, last weekend we went to this place and we went to a wine tasting, and I'm like, Dad drinks wine? But it's a good time to kind of, I guess, get to know your spouse and just kind of have fun times and stuff.
Shelby?
My parents definitely got a lot more coupley, because beforehand it was very, like Danielle said, mom and dad. Dad would always be working or on his computer, and mom would be off doing, helping us with homework or doing something else. Well, going back home and seeing them hug or kiss even, I'm just like, what's going on? And but it was really nice because they just seem a lot more close.
Yeah. Emily?
Yeah, so what my parents do is, well, actually my dad travels a lot for work. And so now what's able to happen is my mom's able to go with him on the work trips. And traveling's a really big thing in my family. So now they can kind of go and do it together instead of when my dad goes on these like 2-week trips to Asia, my mom's not left at home. Or if she doesn't go on those trips, she's allowed to go on her own trip is like the thing. So then she's not left.
Okay, and I haven't asked the guys, did your parents do anything different?
Well, my mom's a single parent, so I noticed that she started working a lot more now that I'm not at home. But in addition to that, not only is she working more, but she's also trying to change her career path right now. She works with mentally disabled people right now, but she's looking into getting into real estate investment. So it's kind of a big change, but she decided that she wanted to do it for herself. So she kind of threw herself into that. So I'm happy for her.
That's great. And Stephen?
Well, the biggest change I think I noticed was that my room has now become like the storage room.
I'm going to put in a pitch for the students here. If you could possibly avoid changing their room in the first year, they like to have a space to come home to that is their own. Once they start getting an apartment, then it's okay to change their room. But I had one student who the parents took over her bedroom, and when she came home, she was relegated to the upper bunk in her sister's room. And she said, you know, I like my sister, we actually have nice conversations, but it's her space, and I'm invading it, and I need my own. So to the extent that you can avoid that problem, please do. But the other part of it is that students do see the things that you do after they leave and see that you continue to change. That's a really good model for them. And they might get a little offended when they're home, but then they go back and tell their friends, you know what my parents are doing now? This is kind of cool. So don't hesitate to do those sorts of things. Communication. I will frequently have parents ask me, how often should I be talking to my student? We do a lot of research with families, and I know at our university, which tends to be a school where students are a little more independent, fully a third of our students are in touch with their family 1 or more times a day. There is a difference between genders. For the girls, it's about half that are in touch 1 or more times a day. For the boys, it's about 25%. So there is a different issue coming on. If your son is not calling home all the time, he's just being a guy. Wanted to ask all of you, actually, how often you communicate and what the communication is like. Cassandra, you're new at it. How often are you in touch with your family?
I'd like to preface with, I love my parents dearly, and I do miss them. But right now, I think they're going through the kind of detaching process. And with the amount of time I have to talk to them on a daily basis, not many things are changing. That on a weekly basis, I can kind of, get on the phone with them and tell them what was new and what I did and what was fun and what was bad. But on the daily, a text would be good, just to say, this is what's new. But, constant contact is a little overkill, so.
Vince?
Well, one of the things that I noticed coming into college is that texting became a thing between my mom and I. Before, I didn't even know that she knew her phone had buttons on it. But yeah, it kind of gets hard to find a time where you can actually sit down and have a meaningful conversation, with all the things that students get involved in. Everyone's really busy, and it's okay, we can talk for 15 minutes at midnight on Thursday. But yeah, just keeping kind of smaller conversations, and then having every couple of weeks, a longer half an hour to an hour conversation, I found has been enough to keep our communication.
Stephen, what about you as a senior?
Yeah, so I don't keep in contact with my parents that frequently anymore. But usually, if I haven't heard from them in maybe a month or so, I'll make sure I call them and kind of catch up. So.
What about your brother?
Oh, yeah. So my older brother is autistic, and through now Social Security, there's a program where he actually has his own phone now. So he'll call me every now and then, and he'll just he'll say hi, and he'll blow me some kisses, and then hang up. Which those calls I definitely look forward to. So,
Emily.
It really just depends on my week and how busy I am, but I'm usually at least trying to text my parents or have some form of communication. Phone calls are really difficult due to the 3-hour time change because usually I have free time in the like mid-morning. Well, they are in bed, so I can't I don't really want to wake them up. Or when I do have free time, my dad's still at work. So that can be really difficult, and it just kind of depends on the day. I've learned that if I call my mom and talk to her, the information will get relayed on to my father, and usually I'll just text my dad every once in a while just to check in with him. But yeah.
Shelby, you talked about different communication with different members of the family.
Yeah, I use about every communication possible short of a carrier pigeon. And I write letters to my grandma. She likes to communicate that way. My parents are Facebook parents, so my mom will send me, when she knows I have a test one day, she'll send me a motivational little blurb or a cute picture or something like that. But I talk to my parents pretty frequently, whether it's through text or on the phone.
Danielle, do you have any Facebook rules for parents?
My mom, she doesn't really, she just looks at Facebook, but she doesn't really do anything with it. But talking to my mom tried the whole call me every day thing, and I'm just like, Mom, come on. But I've learned, and we've both learned actually, especially over the 4 years, it's more worthwhile to let me call than to call me, I guess. So, because if you call your kid every day, that's just going to be the same, oh, what'd you do today? Oh, I went to class. Okay, cool. But I'll call my mom of my own will, maybe 3-ish times a week. And it's generally times when I actually have something to say. So I'll have a good half-hour conversation that means something. And you're getting something out of it. So the most worthwhile conversations, I think, come from letting your child call you. And I like to keep in those conversations, I keep in touch with my mom. I'll be oh, I have a test on Monday. And then I'll get the text in the morning. I'll wake up, be wake up, good luck on your test. And those are the best. But yeah.
Well, and I truly think that texting has been the best gift to parents and students. A phone call, like they indicated, it can be sort of hard to hang up on your mom and say, I've really got better things to do right now. But texting, you kind of want that check-in. You just want to know they're still alive. And they're okay with responding briefly to a text in generally. What I do encourage, however, is that you do talk to them occasionally, once a week, once every 2 weeks. You know your student best, and families often can pick up when things are going wrong before people on campus can. So listen for the voice being different, the tone being different. If you notice there seems to be a problem, call them on it, because we do want to get them to the support that they need. We wanted to save some time for questions, and we do have a few minutes here. You can ask me questions, you can ask them questions. We've given them instructions for how to deflect if they don't want to answer it. So do you have any questions for any of us at this point? In the back. Okay, I'm not sure that I heard anything, but I think it was related to homesickness. Yep, okay. Do you guys have any suggestions? Oh, well, actually, we do have some suggestions for homesick, yes.
I think I heard you right, you want suggestions on how to deal with homesickness? Homesickness is one of those things, it's going to happen, so you can't just be oh, stop being homesick. But I think the best way is to suggest them to go to different programming. Especially as a freshman, there's so many things that Case puts on, and especially within your residence hall. So if they live in a dorm, there's people around them all the time. And the best cure to homesickness that I've found is to just make friends and have you really get homesick when you have a lot of free time and you're just kind of sitting there dwelling on the fact that oh, I want to be home, or I miss this and that. But if you fill your free time with people or programs or other things you can do, then you don't have time to think about it.
She's right. If students are busy, it's it's not possible to be homesick. They just don't have the time for it. There are, however, some students who are going to be so homesick that it is a significant issue. If that continues, if it really is stopping them from meeting people, from doing things, there is a counselor here that can work with that. There are staff on campus who work with issues that are common among students, and they're really good at it, so make that referral. There's a question down here, and we have a microphone now.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about coming back home, but can you talk more about when you go to college, you get a lot of independence. You have no schedule, you can go out all hours of the night. Can you talk a little bit about when the students come back home and what conversations about, when they're in high school, you had curfews, you have to be in at this hour. Talk a little bit about that part, frustrations for the parents about that independence.
That is a frustration, and it's legitimate. I'm going to start by asking any of you guys, did you have those conversations with your students or with your parents, or did it just happen, and how did you work it out with your family?
Being in college, you can go off to Denny's at 2 in the morning or something like that. But going home, I had the mindset that it's still my parents' house and I'm still under their rules. But I think they were also a lot more lenient because they understood that I was, in a different environment and that I was starting to move more towards that environment and how it catered to everybody. So if I was going to see friends or something, they would be, you can stay out later, but communicate more. There were compromises in what they would let me do.
Anyone else? Yeah, Ben's.
So for me, it was kind of along the same lines, but we didn't really have to have a conversation about it. It almost kind of just happened. My parents realized, my mom realized that I had this independence and that yes, I was at home, but I was kind of going to do my own thing. So instead of the conversation being, hey mom, can I go over to Taylor's house? It was, hey mom, I'm going to Taylor's house. I'll see you later, or I'll see you tomorrow. And just kind of letting them know hey, this is what I'm doing. And the parent kind of respecting the fact that your student is now going to be independent, it makes for a better relationship.
And I want to stress from the parent side, you do need that respect, and it's fair to ask, if you're not going to be home for dinner, I need to know that because I don't need to fix dinner for you. So give me some ideas in terms of what makes sense and what doesn't. And I have certainly heard parents, you may not be able to sleep until they come home. It's the way it used to be. I've had parents say, I don't care how long you stay out, but the car needs to be home by 2 o'clock. So working on it from that point. Danielle, did you have something?
I was going to say similar to what both of them said, communication definitely increased. I had a situation where my curfew, as I aged through high school, it became later. And even now when I go home, I don't want to stay out past 2. But if I would, there would be times when I would say oh yeah, I'm gonna go to so-and-so's house, I'll be back by 1 or 2. She's like, all right, that's fine. And then I'd go there and I'd end up staying the night. And the only thing I would just shoot her a text. She doesn't, my mom and dad don't sleep with their phones, but I'd shoot them a text. She wakes up in the morning and she sees oh, she's gonna be home this morning. So just keeping communication there is definitely key.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm looking for some advice about having a better understanding of what's going on with your son, who is not a big communicator. So I find it hard to gauge whether he's having a good time or he's okay or not. Any thoughts around that?
I could probably take this one. My guess would be that if he's not communicating with you, if he doesn't need anything, he's probably doing just fine. I'm really bad about calling my parents, but I don't think they worry about me. So it's probably okay.
Any of the rest of you have any thoughts on that? You don't have to, but. Okay. One thing I will say is I I know that parents tend to worry, and this may not address you specifically, but parents tend to worry about the quiet student, the one who maybe won't stand up for himself. I get calls from parents who will say, my son would never talk to his roommate about this, and then give this horrible situation. As it turns out, when we do some checking, the student has figured out a way that he can address it with his roommate in a round, not the way you would do it, but they figured something out. Quiet students contribute a lot to the institution. We really like the quiet student. For one thing, they don't tend to cause as much trouble, but the other side of it is that they are very thoughtful. They tend to add more to class discussions. And they do find their friends. They do work their way into the community. So they really are, they're a valuable resource. So try not to worry that much about it. And I do think one of the toughest things is when you don't see that they are doing things the way what you would think anybody would choose to do. But very often they have worked something out and they are moving towards gaining that confidence. And that's one of the things that they pick up simply by being in college is, well, if you've got to talk to somebody about something, then you'll do it. So any other issues? There's one back here.
Yes, I'm wanting to address something with my son, but I don't know if I should, and that's the issue of what I would call dating relationships, which I guess makes me sort of old-fashioned. But I'm wondering about saying something to him like, the first time I hear about your girlfriend, I don't want to hear that you're engaged. I'd like to hear about something. I'd like to hear more about it. But I don't know whether that's really a topic that I should completely leave in his hands to initiate, or whether I should attempt to open up a conversation about that.
Okay, I'm going to ask some of you, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that maybe you could open up by like saying, you know, I'm still here if you need advice. That when you talk about friends that of the other gender, that still counts as a friend because that's where it starts, that it's going to develop. But yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
That's good. Anyone else?
My mom's kind of like, I love my mom to death, but she's kind of like a prior, and she, like, I've always been the girl that's like had a lot of guy friends, even in high school, and she acts like this is a new thing. And like, I'll just talk about my friends like on the phone, and when I go home, is he your boyfriend? Is that your boyfriend? Are you dating that person? And I'm like, no, Mom. But like dating people, I think you don't ever, like, I get what you're saying. You don't want to just come out and be like, so do you have a girlfriend? Like, what do you think? But I think definitely like what she said, just kind of keeping it open and saying like, if he talks about a certain group, you can kind of start telling, because like if your son's gonna start talking about a girl a lot and you'd be like, so are you guys dating? Like, it's not, I mean, you're his dad. You're allowed to know. So.
It's true if you ask flat out, so do you have a girlfriend, that does feel like prying. You can often ask in less direct ways. Another issue that comes up is you might want to know about whether your student is drinking. If you say, are you drinking? They're going to take it pretty poorly. So asking questions like, so how are you making friends? You know, what kind of friends? What do you and your friends do? Is a way to sort of start gaining. They have a tendency to respond in those less direct conversations. About the partying, what do case students do on the weekend? And then they can talk about case students rather than about what I do on the weekend. So those indirect sort of questions, you end up getting a lot more information from.
I would agree with that. Like, my parents will kind of ask me more like casual questions, or like they'll make it kind of funny, like instead of being like, are you dating someone? They'll be like, oh, anybody out there for you? Or like, or they'll like make it kind of more like with humor. So it's more of a lighter tone, which is helpful. Or like my parents will be like, oh, like, what did you do this weekend? Anything fun going on? And like, they make it so it's up to you to say whatever information you feel like sharing.
Yeah, prying doesn't necessarily get responses, but conversation does. And I'm going to ask you, you talked a little bit about your mom and your aunt asking you about partying.
Yeah, so this past summer I was visiting some family, and then my mom, and I was walking with my mom and her cousin, who I'm actually close with, and they started asking me about what the party scenes are like in college now, and it was actually a really nice conversation because they were just curious to know what weekends are like in college now compared to what they were when they were in college. And so it was kind of like this mutual conversation where I would share information and they would be like, well, when we were in college, this is what we would do. And they were just really curious to figure out, like, because when they were in college, the drinking age was 18, and now that it's 21, how does that affect things? But it was just it was actually a really nice conversation to have.
I think we have time for maybe one more question if anybody has one.
Oh. Everybody wants to know that.
Does anyone else? I can.
I mean, I'm not afraid to take it. I'm a 21-year-old, so I have no shame about my life. I mean, people coming into Case, a lot of people, and I know I was like this, thought like, okay, Case is like a really smart kid school. It's not like Ohio State or like some state school where there's going to be, you know, a huge party scene. But there definitely is, like, there is, just like any college, like there's going to be a party scene anywhere. And it's just like if your kid gets into it or not. I mean, you're not on campus, so like no one's really there to say like, hey, you can't go out or you can't do that. But I mean, there are so many programs or like things that are in place to make sure that your child's safe, especially like, I mean, as first year students and anytime you live in dorms or on campus housing, you have like RAs and GRMs, which they're there kind of like to make sure that everything's going all right to keep your kids safe. And then we have so many police departments in this one little area. There's like, Case has their own police, University Circle has their own police, Cleveland Heights has police, and like, so there's a lot of safety measures. So like, it is a college. I mean, don't be naive about it where you don't think there is a party scene, because there definitely is. But I mean, there are a lot of safety precautions.
Going off that, I think like kind of like the saying at Case, like if you want to go out, you can go out and have fun. If you want to stay in, that's perfectly fine too. Like you'll find a lot of people who just stay in and like want to watch a movie too. So it's up to you what you feel like doing. A lot of people also just study. Like it happens. Like it's Case. So
yeah, you're never pressured to do anything. Like, there are some people who can go out to a party, you know, every night of the weekend, and there's some people who just, that's not what they're interested in. But you're never like forced or like pressured to like move in one direction or the other. It's very like, you decide, it's your choices, so.
I think it's a good conversation to have with your student, because I mean, you don't want the end of the year to come and then you're like, okay, well, you're excited for next year, and they're like, actually, I failed out, Mom. So like, to keep that conversation going, it might be awkward to bring it up, but I know my mom brought it up with me, and I didn't mind talking about it just because like, it's nice to know, and it's also good to keep tabs on your student to make sure that they're not falling behind. Like maybe they're having a lot of fun on weekends all the time and not studying at all, but you don't want that to happen.
And the communication piece is, I think, the most important. Research has shown that parents' expectations related to drinking can outweigh peer pressure. So if they know what your expectations are, they may still drink, but the level of drinking is going to be much lower, and they may choose not to drink because they don't want to let you down. So please do continue those conversations. There will be issues. No student gets through school without something coming up. However, Case turns out really, really amazing graduates. So if your student has some issue and you start to think, who is this kid? Are we going to get through it? Keep these students in mind. They're turning out really, really well, and your student will too. Please help me in thanking them. Just one last word. Until now, your job was to protect your student. From this point on, your job is to empower your student. You are not letting them go, you are letting them grow. Thank you.